Well, welcome everybody. You got Larson Stair here from Stair Step Strategies with another episode of Musings of the Entrepreneur. I am joined by Nate Stoltenow. Nate, pleasure to meet you. Welcome.
Thanks, Larson. I appreciate it. Good to be here.
Yeah, how's the day going so far?
Excellent. Yeah. Excellent week. I can't complain.
Perfect. Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Well, I really appreciate you taking some time here today. Really, the main focus of really our conversation. We met a few weeks ago. Really had a lot of synergies between a lot of the people that we're working with, what we're working on, our areas of expertise. But one thing that really kind of stood out to me that I really wanted to talk with you more about is around lead gen. And what I've noticed is I started my career as an SDR way back eons ago. And I promise you it was much easier to generate leads and quality leads back in, 10 years ago or so. And things have really changed in kind of this new day and age now. And that's what I really want to talk about is lead gen and how do we create a really good lead gen strategy to generate quality pipeline. So I'm excited to talk a little bit more about that. But as a starting point, would you mind give a little bit of background, maybe on yourself, what you've been working on, and some of the areas of focus you wouldn't mind?
Yeah. Thanks. I appreciate that. I started in SaaS in 2007. I was in Salt Lake City at the time, and I didn't know what SaaS was. I got involved with an early stage company. I was employee number 7, and we ended up raising some money and putting together a interesting kind of product and go to market strategy. And we ended up growing that business to about 250 employees and 3 offices. And just was a really great experience for me because I got in early and had an opportunity to grow with the business. But with that growth really came more responsibility. So I went from individual contributor to player coach to then leading a team of 11 enterprise sellers. And so it just gave me a really robust understanding of all aspects of sales from management down to how do you create a pipeline when, you don't have any, right? What do you do?
Yeah.
And so I really enjoyed that. And then from there, I was VP of sales of a number of early stage companies. And really in the last handful of years, I got pulled in to consult kind of one-off for either other similar early stage SaaS companies or just even like friends who had early stage companies. And they'd have me come in and they look at, say, look at my pipeline, or could we talk about closing strategies, or could we talk about all facets of sales? And what I realized is anytime that I dug into pipeline, my question would be something to the effect of, hey, what does your pipeline coverage look like? And tell me about your revenue goals for the year. What are your goals for this year? And so business would say something like, yeah, we want to have 10 million in new business this year. And I'd say, oh, great. Okay. Show me your pipeline coverage. And then you'd see they'd have, I don't know, $3 or $4 million in pipeline coverage. And that may be okay if you have a
Yeah.
plan, right? But a lot of times I'd say, then, next question would be, and I think most people would ask is, what's your closing percentage, like of your pipeline? What percentage that's going to close? And right, the standard is always kind of the same. It's anywhere from 25 to 35%. And so you just I started laying out this plan to these founders and these CEOs, early stage CEOs. And it's like, hey, of course, like we can do all the other stuff. We can fix that stuff, but really you have a pipeline coverage issue. And so that really dragged me into top of funnel. And I kept kind of going back like, yeah, we can do all that stuff, but why don't we rectify your pipeline coverage first? Let's figure out a strategy to be able to do that. And so over the years, man, early in my career, I had success with cold email before people were even calling it cold email. I would build my own mail merge through Word and CSVs and Excel. And I would send emails to get meetings at trade shows. Like this was my strategy. I knew that if I could get conversations at trade shows, like in front of people, that I could build pipeline. And so that was my whole thing. I used email early. And I'm talking like 08, 09, 2010.
Okay.
I started using
Yeah.
email then. And it allowed me to get conversations, but I wasn't thinking about demos or I wasn't thinking about Zoom calls. I was thinking about like, hey, I'm going to be at this trade show. Are you going to be there? If so, I want to meet up. I want to go to, have a drink. I want to meet at your booth. I want to, I was trying to figure out, are these people going to be there so I could get in like, interact with them in a way that I could get in front of them.
Yeah.
And that was my whole thing. It was just like, hey, I'm going to use this thing to start conversations. So when I left that business, I thought, well, man, I had a lot of success with that. Are there other avenues where I could help them also
Mhm.
start conversations? And so that was what kind of put me into this world of thinking about cold email, building pipeline with email. And so I would do that for businesses. And that started about 5 years ago, where I kind of just started doing that for companies.
Nice.
And that's what I've been kind of doing ever since. And there's a lot of other things that go into that, but it really started with cold email.
Yeah. Wow. That's incredible. And it's not really special about the early days of starting a company when you're on kind of everyone's kind of an IC, so to speak, in the early days, and you're really going after and you have to try a lot of different stuff. And I think that really blends nicely into stage agnostic. You could be a very mature company. There's still a lot of experimentation that needs to happen when it comes to that lead gen strategy, because it seems like it's an ever evolving target. Like as you're finding things that work, it seems like the pace of innovation is moving so quickly nowadays that what worked yesterday literally might not work today. And so you really have to be a student of the game, so to speak.
Student, you have to be. And this is one thing, and you reminded me of the fact that when I started in sales, there was no Zoom info. It didn't exist. Right.
Oh, yeah.
I say this often and people are like, yeah, yeah. Like you even referred how difficult it is to be in sales. And I agree today, but actually today also the contrary to that would be, this is the greatest time to be alive as a salesperson. It's
Very
never
fair
been
point.
easier. It's never been easier. Like literally I could go in for $49 a month. I could get an Apollo subscription and I could find a person's direct phone number. Now again, 40% of the time, but either way, I could go in and get a direct, I could get a direct mobile phone number for that person.
Yeah.
Like that is crazy, right? There is times where salespeople before us would have probably given their right arm to have access to the information,
Oh,
and we don't even leverage it. The only way that they could build pipeline in the past was they literally got in the car and drove around the county or the city they're in, right?
yeah.
Like we don't know how good we have it, and then we're complaining that pickup rates have gone down. It's the wildest thing that we would complain about these things.
Yeah, I love that point. You're absolutely right. I mean, information is more accessible than it's ever been in the past. It's easier to get in touch with anybody. I mean, I do firmly believe that with the right outreach strategy, the right messaging, you can pretty much get in touch with anybody on the face of the earth, I think. But you have to
Right.
be creative enough and know enough about them, their business, and have it be relevant to a point in time. So I absolutely agree with you. And I really like that contrarian point, because while it has gotten tougher, it has also gotten way easier too. Because I remember copying and pasting. I was in Zoom Info in the early days, and copying and pasting emails in that bulk exports. It was like super time consuming.
Super
So
time
yeah,
consuming.
you're
But the
absolutely right.
alternative was before that, I had to figure out like, okay, how do I get a hold of the CMO of the North Face? This is a use case that I ran into. Like, hey, the CMO of the North Face, I want to get a hold of them. How do I do that? I have no idea. So what I had to do is I had to go to Google, which we had access to, and I was looking for press releases, right? Just so I could figure out who that person was.
Mhm.
Oh, I can't remember at the time who it was, it's Tim Anderson. Okay, now I have to reverse engineer Tim Anderson's email. Is it Tim dot Anderson? Is it T Anderson? And I would just try. And if it didn't bounce back, then I was like, okay, I assume it's it. Then I'm calling, not the information, I'm calling a gatekeeper and I can have a name that I can actually ask for. Right. So yeah, I think part of it is like the evolution of sales, but also, I'm not going to say there's a lack of creativity today, but there's just some of the stuff is just so much easier that we can just like, well, I called the number and I sent the email and I didn't get a response. So I don't know. It's difficult out there. And I think your point is exactly it. We need to be creative. We need to be thinking about unique ways to get people's attention,
Mhm.
right? So that
Absolutely.
could be a great email. It could be an incredible cold call. Those are all good things, but it could be, hey, I sent him a note. I sent him a letter,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
I dropped a direct message on LinkedIn. I mean, there's countless other things that we could
Oh
do,
yeah.
but it's about being creative and thinking
Yeah.
outside the box for sure.
Yeah. That's certainly always been a mantra of mine as I've either built sequences or reached out to folks, like just try to, work the process as much as I can and come up with as many new ideas as possible. One thing I wanted to ask you too, just kind of looping back to some of your work with Humble Co. You mentioned working with a lot of different companies right now. Sales is changing very quickly. I'm curious from
Yeah.
your perspective with, many of the companies you're working with, what are you noticing as some of the most common problems in sales or in general for companies that they're facing today? Like, what are you noticing from that standpoint?
Well, I kind of primed the pump on that early, like not enough pipeline coverage.
Yeah.
But you know what that's a lack of? I've found, at least I believe, that's a lack of conversations. Like you just do not have enough conversations going.
Mm.
So I have a simple, just kind of like formula. The formula would be like, who are you going after? How many conversations are you having? Right? Because if you can increase conversations, then you can increase pipeline. I'm a
Yep.
big believer in this idea of really the basics are, hey, I got to identify my ICP. I got to start conversations. And then from there, I can build pipeline. And
Yeah.
most companies just don't have enough conversations going, right?
You're
Think
absolutely
about
right.
SDRs, you think about AEs, you think about even founders or founder-led companies. They're not talking to enough people. So if you're not talking to enough people, then you're not going to build pipeline. The other thing is too, like these people, like buyers exist. A big problem is we sit behind our computers, right? How much better would this be if I could be in your office right now and we could be hanging out together? So much better.
Yeah.
Well, why do we not think about sales the same? Why don't we think about that? Like a good friend of mine has a buddy who is, he's a principal in a VC firm, actually probably private equity. But the takeaway here is he lives in a city and he flies to LA each week to hang out at the LA Country Club, to golf a few rounds, to just get partnered up. Why? Why does he do this? He knows that that's where his buyers are.
Yeah.
So he spends time with where, places where his buyers are, right? And you think about this like, wow, what a great strategy. The guy just gets on a plane and he goes and golfs a few rounds a week but yet he's still doing, but we could do the same thing. Yet we don't. We sit behind our
Yep.
board, we fire off some emails, make some cold calls and complain about the fact that sales is so difficult. When the fact of the matter is we can all jump on a plane. I'm sure your company or our whatever, like would be happy to foot the bill for us to go to a trade event, to some trade show, to any place where these buyers are going to be hanging out so you can get conversations started. I just think that that's a critical thing that we miss is like, where are your buyers hanging out?
Mhm.
And figure that out. Like that's where you should be. That's where you should be hanging out as well, because
Certainly.
that's how you build pipeline.
Yeah. Well, talk about a much more a situation where both parties are actually, but much more pleasant. Like as the prospector or person being prospected, if you do it correctly, like, hey, the salesperson is probably having a good time because they're out playing golf in LA. That's probably not a bad gig. But then the conversation that they're having might be more like human and less like transactional if you
Right.
approach it in the right type of way where you can actually build some rapport and it doesn't feel like this transactional type of environment.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's one of the starting points is, hey, as a business, do you have enough conversations going?
Yeah.
And if not, you got to rectify that.
And I love the word conversation too, because it's so easy to get really heavily KPI focused, but that just kind of simplifies it. It's like, you can send all the emails in the world you want, all the cold calls and all this and that and the other. But if it's not resulting in a discussion with your ICP, we're just kind of spinning our wheels here a bit. Right. So I think that's a good kind of metric or KPI to be tracking and making sure that is this effective
Yeah.
way of discussions.
None of these tools today kind of do a good job of capturing that. I think about cold email as an example. I really don't care about open rates. I only kind of look at reply rates, but really positive reply rates. Like out of 1,000 emails sent, are there any positive replies back? If so, that's going to be that door to be able to start conversations, right?
Yep.
I can start conversations with these individuals. Typically, we can get them to a meeting. And if we can get them to a meeting, then that's where we can actually start building legitimate pipeline.
Absolutely. Nice. Well, so just knowing that, so that's some of the common threads of, maybe issues or changes that we're seeing is just lack of pipeline coverage. So when you think about offering some strategic advice to the clients you may be working with or others out there, like where do you think someone should start like that about solving this type of problem?
Well, I mean, the short answer is I like cold email, but maybe not for the reasons that most people think. I like cold email because it scales.
Yeah.
It's something, it's like the audible of sales. So what do I mean by that? You look like a fit guy. You probably like the mountain bike or run or whatever, right? So, A lot of times you put earbuds in. And so there's the ability to do two great things at once. You can listen to music, but most of us also enjoy podcasts or listening to a book.
Mm.
Like it's also another like modern marvel, the ability that we can do like two really cool things at the same time.
Yeah,
I think about emails like the same way. Like if you don't have a cold email strategy, then you're just missing out because it's something that scales so nicely and it affords your
certainly.
sales team the ability to then pick up the phone, make calls, or be really intentional about what they're doing on LinkedIn or driving around the city and knocking on doors.
Yeah.
It's so much better than just sitting around and thinking, all right, I should probably send some emails. Like I talk to some guys, they send 7, 8, 9, like customized emails a day. Don't even waste your time. Because if
Mm.
you send 8 personalized emails a day, you're not really doing sales. You're just like sitting around, like trying to figure out like what you might have in common with that person. But half of those are going to go to spam anyways. So you're really
Yeah.
sending 4 emails. Out of that, like it's highly unlikely that you're going to get one conversation going that day. So I would much rather just get in my car and drive around to tech companies in my area or whoever
Yeah,
my ICP is, because you're going to get more conversations started.
for sure. Absolutely.
But a terrible use of your time. However, if you said, okay, I'm going to be intentional. I've got my company is invested in a sequencer. We spent thousands of dollars on this thing and they've given me this data. All right, I'm going to be intentional for the next 3 days. I'm going to do a little research, write a couple emails, and then I'm going to set this thing up with the intention that I don't have to do much work with it going forward. I'll just feed this thing.
Mhm.
Now,
Yeah.
again, we're taking, of course, A/B testing and all this other stuff, of course, the big part of it. But let's assume that you can get and just feed this thing and it will sort of just perform for you. And then now I have the ability now make more calls, be more intentional on LinkedIn, maybe start creating content. That's another thing we should talk about. But I just think cold email is like, you should just have a strategy, be intentional about it, but do something there so that you can then now go do something else.
Certainly. One thing that kind of sparked a thought is like what I'm hearing is, cold eval is a good backbone for any sort of lead generation strategy. But if you're single pronged and just going one way, that's really not going to be the most effective way. Like just email alone, mixing in other different channels, in-person stuff, sending a letter, like what have you. So you're not really sure what's really going to resonate with somebody. But yeah, as you kind of think about the cold email specifically, I've always found there's a unique, delicate balance between getting the right volume and then customization versus automation. How do you think about kind of those kind of three different, levers you might pull when it comes to a whole email?
Yeah. Number one is you have to hit the inbox. Too many companies sit around testing emails and they can't hit the inbox,
Mm.
right? So if you're running a cold email strategy today, you have to have multiple domains and you should never send off of your primary, right? So if you're sending cold emails from outreach off your primary and you're sending 300-400 emails a day, like a huge percentage of those emails are going to go to spam. Complete
Yeah.
waste of time. And you're going to burn up your primary domain and not be able to send emails to people even internally, right? So
Mhm.
so first and foremost, you have to hit the inbox. And so a lot of times why people want to outsource is they just don't want to manage all that. They don't want to go
Mhm.
set up secondary domains. And so like our team, that's just kind of table stakes for us. So we'll just go get those domains, set it up, and then run the campaigns in a way that it's not going to hurt your primary domain. But the other piece is we want to do things in a way that everything's set up. So it gives you, high confidence or at least higher likelihood that you're going to hit the inbox.
Mhm.
So a lot of times people will minimize this and say, well, yeah, but it's really about the messaging or whatever. 100% of emails that go to spam don't get read. So if you send 100 emails and 60% of your emails are going to spam, right? Like that's a big waste of time, right? So
Yeah.
I want to flip that. I want to get to a point where at least 60 to 70% we know with some certainty that they're going to be able to hit the inbox.
Mhm.
Then once we do that, then you start A/B testing because then
Yeah.
you can actually test based on some results. So that's a big piece of it. That's like a component that like, we just put a lot of time and effort into.
Yeah. Talk about a great place in terms of foundation to be, set, so to speak, is like having multiple domains there, making sure that you're not burning. I mean, listen, like when I was running my company previously, we never really had domain reputation issues, but we did get kicked out of Gmail a few times. And just for sending
Yeah.
too many emails out there. And, we didn't really deploy this type of strategy. I certainly think it's the right way to go, just so you're not trying to send an email to an investor and it's like, it's not getting it to them. It's like, that's a huge problem, or customer support or anything like that. It's not really a good way to go about it.
Right. So then I think you asked a couple other add-on questions. I don't think I got to those. But as far as, remind me what they were. Do you remember?
Yeah. So, well, it was really around like, how should you solve the lack of pipeline issue? I mean, I have questions around what is the right pipeline coverage, but then how do we solve for this? And you kind of talked about the bedrock, which is multiple domains, but what other things should we consider?
Well, I think it has to do, and again, I've heard lots of people talk about this idea of, oh, and I remember what it is you're talking about personalization versus like,
Oh, that's right. Yes, you're right.
and I think this is a great one. A lot of debate out there, but I'm fully entrenched in the camp of, there's not many of us in this camp, but relevancy at scale. I think at this point, we've seen enough emails to say, hey, Nate, I see you went to such and such school, or, hey, Nate, I see you're in Salt Lake City. Have you ever tried this restaurant? Like that is not personalization, right? So what I would rather do is build some sort of relevancy into a sequence that's going to hit the problem or pain of a lot of different people. So examples could be, hey, Larson, I noticed you're on HubSpot and I assume you get a lot of inbound leads. Recently, we helped a business automate all of their texting to increase conversion by 37%. Interested. Right. So it's just like, hey, I know you're on HubSpot because I can see that based on, okay, I can pull a list. I can see that. And I know that we help companies implement cold texting, not cold texting, but some sort of text message tool. Like that's how I would think about that. Now you might get that and say, well, no, I'm not interested because that's not on my radar. Like I don't get any inbound leads, or no, we already have that. So that's fine. They're not even going to remember. You're just on to the next one. But what you're looking for, and this is all we're looking for in sales, is somebody to say, I was just thinking about that because, man, our conversions are bad. Right. And again, this is the other thing. Man, my emails are going to spam. So yeah, I'll have an alternative. I just figured this out. A text option would be great. And then boom. And you get these emails back. I was just thinking about this. Could we do a demo tomorrow? This happens because, again, we want to think about our TAM, our total addressable market, to ensure that we're hitting enough people. And again, that's where cold email allows you and affords you the ability to do that at scale versus the person that's telling me, hey, I sent 14 highly personalized emails yesterday, but man, I'm concerned. I'm not getting enough meetings. Well, I can tell you why. You just don't have enough at bats. You're not getting enough at bat enough. So it's the balance of like, hey, I need to have a big enough. So that's the other thing. If you're selling some sort of enterprise solution that there's only 300 companies in the world that need your product, cold email is not the strategy for you. Right?
Yeah.
Because
it's not a big enough pond.
Not a big enough pond. And those conversations really matter. So then my strategy there is going to be completely different. It's going to be some sort of really highly intentional. Again, maybe it's a trade show. Maybe we're going to position ourselves to be on a panel or something at that trade show, but that's a completely different argument. Yet that's where everybody goes. Hey, we don't want to burn our TAM. Well, that's thinking pretty highly of you if you think that these people are going to remember you because you sent them like 2 cold emails. If we do not remember these people, we don't, right? Especially in SMB where there's like, I don't know, some of these companies can go after like 30 or 40,000 companies, maybe more.
Yeah.
It's thinking pretty highly of yourself to think, yeah, I'm going to burn my TAM because I sent like all 30,000 2 emails over the course of 9. No, these people do not remember you.
I tell you, I could not agree with this more in the sense of, but what I experience a lot of times is the analysis paralysis of founders I'm working with or people I'm working with where, oh, I need to reach out to this company, and then weeks later, I still need to reach out to them, but they're just so worried that the messaging or this is all going to be wrong. I'm like, listen, right? Half won't even open it. So know that like half won't even open it. Out of that, only some get it out there, get over this hump. Like you get over the hump by doing. And so don't be afraid, just get going.
Something is always better than nothing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'd way rather get someone to tell me to go kick rocks than nothing, just sitting here and just being worried about pipeline not growing at all. So I'll always take that route.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. So, and I think that's the same with LinkedIn. I'm baffled by LinkedIn. Right. So another one would be how many people sleep on LinkedIn as a tool to do outreach.
Mm,
So I think about automating email. And if you're not like, you're not some highly influential individual with tons of followers on
sure.
LinkedIn, you should automate LinkedIn. There's tools for $59 that you can go and you can grab your TAM and you can build a list and you can automate connections and you can automate messaging and you can, and you're not using that tool. It's the greatest B2B opt-in database in the history of mankind. And you're not trying to do like any work on there. LinkedIn boggles my mind that people are not maximizing because it's actually the easiest way. Cold email is actually, from a percentage standpoint and from a technical know-how, you could say actually there's some barriers there. It actually is kind of tricky.
Mhm. Yeah.
LinkedIn is like, it's a no-brainer. Everybody should do that. Everybody should have a motion, because if you're not using it, like, that's a perishable. Like, I just burned another day that I wasn't doing outreach on LinkedIn.
Certainly.
Right.
Certainly.
So I'm a huge believer there in that.
Yeah, again, completely agree with you. I mean, I've used LinkedIn for years now. It's only gotten, well, it's gotten complex, but it's gotten better in terms of people on there, outreach. I mean, there's a lot of people pushing content out there, which I want to touch on next. The content strategy, we talked a little bit about that, but I want to get your thoughts there. It seems relevant to LinkedIn. But if you're not using LinkedIn as a really core part of your outreach strategy, well, A, it's great for gathering information, looking at what people are liking, sharing, commenting. What is their company doing? There's so much information you can gather to help with your outreach that you're putting out there.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. There's some
Yeah.
simple things like, if you just look at who's posting, you know, a simple takeaway, a tip would be like, anybody that's posting is like, it's a window in to see who's active. So I always start there. Like, if I don't know where to start within an industry, where do I do my outreach? Well, there's like almost 800 or 900 million people. Not all of them are active though, right? So I don't want to do
Mhm.
cold outreach or try to connect with individuals that check LinkedIn every 9 months. It's a waste of, it's like sending emails to invalid emails or blocked phone numbers.
Yep.
Yet that is what a lot of times we do that. So what I do is I always just look for people who have posted as the starting point. Then I build my list. That's
Yep.
always the starting point.
Well, that's a great suggestion, because then likelihood of them responding, interacting, anything there is much higher, just because they're active and they're out there.
Yeah. Cause only like less than 1% of people post. So as my
Mhm.
starting point, like if I could go after 8,000 people in like maybe my TAM or my ICP, if
Mhm.
I toggle up a little button and say like posted recently, like it's probably going to go to like 900, maybe not,
Yeah.
maybe 400.
Yep.
Right. But at least now I can at least start with those 400 to know, hey, these people at least have logged in and actually posted something. That's a rare thing within LinkedIn to give me like hand raisers of who's actually active on it.
That's a great tip. How does content play into all this as it pertains to LinkedIn? Like, how do you think about that? And how does that combined with ethical email, LinkedIn outreach, other strategies? Like, how do you
Yeah.
think about that?
Well, so I think there's two ways I think about content. There's the one who maybe you just don't feel comfortable producing content. And I think you need to come to grips with that. You need to decide what's best for you. I would say that everyone should produce content, but I like to approach it from a teaching standpoint. Like, I want to be
Mhm.
viewed as a teacher. And I think it's really interesting that a lot of people don't want to be self promoters, which I'm okay with. Like, I
Mhm.
fall in that category of, I don't really want to be a self promoter, but the way that I'm okay with that is if I teach people how to do stuff. So the people behind me, I can teach them, but then also what it does is it elevates and like, um, the perception then is like that person's teaching, so they actually know what they're talking about. So it's this
Exactly.
weird component of self promotion without self promoting.
Yeah.
So I think about that, but I think everybody should do that. Everybody's got some sort of expertise or some experiences, and so as a starting point, that's always a great place to start, especially if you can align it with the individuals you're trying to start conversations with. I think this works excellent with founders, CEOs, because they have a specific market that they're going after. And if they can nail that, it's such a good job of like the pull component where you're actually driving, legitimate inbounds where you're saying, hey, there's a problem out there. We're actually solving it. We do it in a unique way. Here's how we do it. You start building yourself up as that credible expert, and leads will come. They, just,
Absolutely.
they come all the time. But then there's the other piece where if you still don't feel comfortable, because I know a lot of people that just don't love that idea and maybe don't even know where to start. I think a better option is you should have a strategy to go get on podcasts. So
Mm,
if you're a seed stage or early stage founder or whatever, just founders in general, a high percentage of your time, and this is the other thing too, on especially like technical founders, I think this is really difficult. It's like, how do I do sales? How do I do marketing? Because I have an expertise that is like, this technical thing that's why I'm starting this business. And yeah, the realization of sales and marketing is hard, but not if you spend a high percentage of your time trying to get on podcasts, because
mm,
then it just opens up you to like this really interesting audience. Again, you're the expert. You've been invited to be on this podcast. Now you can share the pain, the problems, and how your business solves it. It really positions you in a way that's, again, that expert to drive inbound leads. And so I would spend, if I'm a technical founder or just a founder in general, I would spend a significant amount of my time. For me personally, I would do three things. I would do, of course, I'd automate the email. So let's take that off the table. Like I
yeah.
would create content on LinkedIn, which I already do. So I would do that. Um, I would do proactive outreach of the people I want to connect with and interact with on LinkedIn. I'd do that. But then I would have a game plan, a proactive game plan where I would use email again and LinkedIn to get on podcasts. And I would invest a big portion of my time, probably 20 or 30% of my time would be
Mhm.
dedicated to those things because they would really pay off for me.
Certainly. Well, and you touched on a few things there that really resonate with how we were running our company, or my company, and how we kind of thought about that. Like I created all of our content 7 days a week on LinkedIn every day, like no
Yeah.
question. And it was a blend of written blog content, videos, photos or whatever it might be. But I really tried to focus on an 80-20 split of
Mm.
80% is educational to the market. I don't get to talk about my product at all. Zero. I get to talk about the problems. And even if, how would I solve the problem if my product didn't even exist? The slow way of solving the problem, perhaps. And so just by talking through like those issues, and then the 20% of the time, yes, I can do some self promotion, but that felt like a better balance, that where I'm like, okay, I feel good. I'm getting my brand out there, but I'm really talking about the problems. And when you talk about the problems, you're staying away from the features. Nobody really cares that much about the features. They care about the problems and they care about solving them themselves. And how do I get this stuff fixed? If you have the features, great. So I think it's repetition on practicing. How do you talk about the issues and the problems that are out there that are unique to your audience? And then, yeah, then occasionally you can throw in, 1 day a week, 1.5 days a week on average, something more self promoting. So it's kind of how I thought about it.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Yeah, I think that's really, but then you are perceived as the expert
Certainly.
by doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
just more
Another,
engaging too. Like just like making sure I make content that I think is interesting, good for me. And then I think other people will find it.
I agree. It's good.
Yeah. Nice. So we touched one thing I want to ask you about. You talked about a few different kind of tools and technology for whether like tech stack related. What are some of the stuff and technologies that you're using here today?
Yeah. So tools that I really enjoyed today. I'm a big believer in Clay. I spent a lot of time in Clay. I love the
Mm,
idea of, just the one is the API consumption model, like the ability for me to be able to consume data without going and signing a 12-month agreement to Zoom Info and have to give them
mhm.
$50,000 or whatever. Like that, to me, that model is dead. And I just don't want to be spending that kind of money. So the
Yeah.
things that I love is Clay just has so much flexibility from an API standpoint. So as an example, I use 4, sometimes 5 databases to find a specific email. And I always start with my cheapest data first. So like an Apollo, then I use
Mhm.
Nimbler. Then I use Prospeo, which is the best for finding emails. Prospeo, I think, is one of the best email finders. And then I use a couple other ones if needed. And then the validation process happens every time. So I only want to pull together like the most valid, up to date email to ensure deliverability is like top
Yeah.
notch. So I love Clay, and then I love pulling all that information together into one table. So a lot of times what I'll do is you can ingest data or you can build the data together on top. So you can make sure you have an up to date email. I'll do a waterfall process for like cold calling campaigns as well. So you're pulling in the best numbers, and there's a process that I use for that. And I really at this point can't say enough good things about Clay. It is a little bit intimidating for people out of the gate. And so that is maybe the downside for that product. But then from there, I will automatically add it. So a lot of customers will add it like automatically into HubSpot. Well, they're using integration there. You can add it right into, we'll use Hey Reach for LinkedIn automation. And then I like Instantly for all of the email sending, because there's automatic domain rotation and it kind of just does all that stuff for us.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I use on that front. There's two dialers that I'm a big fan of. I really like Orem. But then if you're on a budget, I really like Alloware. Alloware is incredible from a whole phone system standpoint, because you get the ability to also integrate into HubSpot and actually automate text messages. So especially for anybody that's opted in and anybody that fills out a form, I love hitting them with the text right away, which they can convert so much better. And for not a lot of dollars, like if you already have a phone system, you can rip and replace really easily and put that in, and it just like seamlessly integrates, gives you a real simple dialer as well. And so we do that for a lot of companies. I'm a big fan of that as well. And then, I'm also really leery of do not call. So we have a whole process where we're ensuring that, and sometimes we'll use Clay for that as well, to ensure that these companies are not on do not. That's just some of it. Again, I'm a HubSpot only guy. So a lot of times if somebody's on Salesforce, I wish everybody the best of luck, but I just don't enjoy working in Salesforce anymore. So I avoid working with companies that are on Salesforce if possible. Now, again, there's legacy enterprise businesses where we will do it, but it creates more work and a lot of confusion and more teams that you have to work with. And so I just really prefer HubSpot.
Nice. Well, that's super helpful. I mean, many of those, some of them I've worked with, some of them I've used, others I've never even heard of before. So you're giving me some ideas about what I should be doing. We'll make sure we list all these out in comments and make sure people have links to all these different tech stack and solutions that are out there. Cause it sounds like, hey, you can make sure you have the right data in place, that you're doing the right outreach to the right people. And I like the kind of cascading strategy that you had. That's super helpful. So
yes, if people have questions about that, I'm happy to help there as well. So
well, that's actually a perfect transition as we kind of wrap up here. Tell us a little bit more like about Humble Co. If I'm interested in working with you, how do I get in touch with you? Tell me a little bit more about that, Nate.
Yeah. So Humble Co. started as cold email outreach, the ability for you to work with us and kind of just take the cold email off of your plate. We'll do the whole thing. We have the data and we have the ability to write the copy, manage the back end. And our job is to really just do our best to seamlessly hand off conversations, right? So setting up meetings for you and your team. And we've been doing that for a long time, but we recently, within the last couple of years, we've been pulled more into even just RevOps. So you think about like, how do I ingest data? How do I clean data? How do I enrich data? And so again, using something like Clay to be able to do that, to pull that together, to build out a more robust CRM, and then action on that, right? So it could be inbound, like what am I doing? How quickly am I following up? What are my processes? I just love whiteboarding that out, building boards where we can think through strategically about how we handle those processes. And I don't love the idea of like being known in the RevOps space, but we do spend a lot of time in the RevOps space, right?
Sure.
But I think of myself and my partner and the team is more of as a partner within sales, especially in the early stage. Best engagements we have are when you have a technical founder that is just looking for somebody that they can trust on the sales side, right? Hey, we need help. We need somebody to link arms with. We need somebody we can trust because, man, I feel like I got to hire somebody, but if I hire somebody who's 25 years old, are they going to do the right thing? That's a difficult first hire. What do I do? So a lot of times it's coming in, it's trying to figure out where the business is. How do we partner with them, build trust, and just like think about a go-to-market strategy that's going to be sustainable, not going to break the bank, and that will work for them to just, like we talked about earlier, start conversations and just build pipeline.
Yeah, that's great too. It sounds like that's exactly the right audience that you should be working with. You have technical founders who 9 times out of 10 have built a really great product, but don't have that deep experience to either hire somebody who can run the sales organization, be a part of the sales organization. A tricky hire. Salespeople have a knack for selling themselves, and they're really good in interview processes, generally speaking.
Well said. Well
Yeah,
said.
and so that sounds like a really great audience. If I'm a technical co-founder or I'm looking for some help, how do I get in touch with you?
Yeah, you can just look me up on LinkedIn. I think that's easiest. Send me a message there. It's Nate Stoltenow. You can send an email if you'd like, Nate
Mhm.
at .co. But I'm easy to get a hold of.
Perfect. Well, great. Well, Nate, one last question. I think one of my new traditions I'm trying to do is the person that was on the discussion last time is going to prompt a question for the next person. Since you're one of the first people I've interviewed, tell me what is the best piece of advice you have for early stage startups. If there's anything, and this is more narrowly focused to early stage, but any advice that you have out there, either that you've experienced personally or what you've worked on others with.
Well, the number one would be start conversations, but we've already hit that. Like really,
Mhm.
like figure out how to start conversations as fast as possible.
Mhm.
Yeah, you don't want to sit on your hands. Analysis paralysis is a killer. I've seen this. The go to market strategy does not need to be perfect. It needs to be something, right? And be willing to shift and to test and just like let those learnings dictate like how you pivot as a business. I think that's really important. But the last thing that you said there, salespeople are great at selling themselves. They're great at selling themselves. That does not mean that they're going to be great sellers for you, though, right? So you need you need to interview. You need to spend time, and you need to hire people that know how to start conversations. Like I've seen too many early stage companies go out and hire somebody that was at fill in the blank Fortune 500 company with a great
Yeah.
name. Well, it's so easy. I don't mean to say it like that, but it's easier to start conversations when some people have heard of your business, right? Well, when they go to work for a company that no one's ever heard of, they don't have any understanding what that looks like. You have to hire that person that knows and is like just a little crazy because they're just willing to test, try, and do things that the average person wouldn't. So it's going to take a little time, and it's going to be a little annoying to find that person, but it's well worth it. It's really well worth it. And yeah, I think it would be like that person that is excited to go to the trade show or is excited to go
Mhm.
to fill in the blank because they're just willing to test stuff. And those people are out there. And
Yep.
those are the people that you, as an early stage founder, technical founder, just like they're the ones that are going to move the needle for you because you can always just keep giving them more responsibility, and they're just going to be crafty, and they're going to think on their feet, and they're going to take ownership in a way that some of these individuals that maybe have spent time cutting their teeth in large organizations, like they just never had to do any of this stuff before, or a lot of the stuff that you need to do as a early stage business.
Certainly. It's all figured out when you're at kind of the Fortune 500 level by comparison to we started last week or last year. It's like there's no playbook. You have to build the playbook. You have to go figure it out by comparison to from working at Salesforce. Like you got a lot of that figured out so far. So it's a different type of breed of individual. And I like that. You have to have a certain type of crazy about you that keep trying to see what's going to work.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly it. The test for me, and the test for me is the Rolodex seller. I don't know how else to say it. Right. It's the individual that says I have a network. And if I'm early stage, I don't want network sellers. If I'm a fintech company that can sell to 8 banks, then I want a network seller. I want an individual that's like been entrenched.
Mhm.
Maybe work for a government agency that works in those banks. I want that
Yep.
person.
Yep.
If I'm an SMB selling $50,000 software to like, a 40,000 company TAM, network doesn't mean anything to me. What that actually indicates is they don't know how to go start conversations and build pipeline. They're actually just good at picking up the phone and calling somebody they did business with in the past. So that Rolodex seller or that network seller, I pass on that person 9 times out of 10, and
Yeah.
most cases, 10 out of 10 times.
Yeah, you're preaching the choir right now. I made that mistake, and frequently investors will push you to hire those folks because it's like, well, they came from X, Y, and Z place. It's like that means nothing in the early days because it's so hard and so challenging. And Rolodexes don't really mean anything when it comes to that stage because people don't really buy because they like you; they buy because they had a problem. And that's a problem that you can solve. It's not just because, we're good buddies and I want to buy something from you. It's not really how it works.
That's right.
Anymore.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Well, Nate, I want to thank you so much for spending some time with me here today. It was a really great conversation. You have a ton of expertise behind how do we, really generate a good pipeline that converts, make sure we have good data behind that, build a really good foundation, doing multi-pronged kind of different types of strategy in terms of outreach. Really appreciate you spending some time with me here today. I hope this was as fun for me. I hope it was fun for you. And I hope everyone got some value out of it.
Excellent. I enjoyed it.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Nate. You have a good rest of your day. Thanks again.